evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me. Down the inside, absolutely possible scene.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He needs to get it done now.
Blakey will dive to the inside.
We were robust. We got our elbows out.
Ronard takes the lead.
Because here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Jarno Watmere is your champion.
Hello everybody, hopefully you've been having a magnificent Monday evening thus far, and fingers crossed we can make it just that little bit better, because we are of course back with PSGL Season 40 action, and on this magnificent Monday it is PlayStation Tears. We've already seen F2 kicking off about an hour ago, and now the big boys are getting underway for round 3 of season number 40, around one of maybe the most famous circuit in motor racing history. It is, of course, Spa-Francorchamps. We had a big upgrade to the circuit on F124. Not too many changes on F125, but we know that the driving physics have altered quite drastically. And going off what we've seen so far, Austria, Saudi Arabia, both very, very exciting races. This should be more of the same. Alongside me, Tom Wilkinson in the virtual commentary box for this evening's action. For the first time this season, I'm delighted to say that I've got Dan alongside me. How are you doing, my friend?
Very well, Tom. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me. And yes, it's a great evening to be here. As you said, we have a track steeped in history in our sport, and we have a group of some of the fastest drivers on the PlayStation platform on F125. So that has to be a recipe for excitement, and I can't wait to get it underway. It's going to be another cracker, surely.
100%. So many legendary corners and legendary moments over the years that we can talk about. But just to kick things off, we will remind you, if you are new here, first of all, where have you been in the first 2 weeks of season number 40? We're going to have a little look at the calendar. 2 races already in the history books, like we said, Austria and Jeddah. Then Spa going on today. Then we have a break week, so no PSGL, PSF1 in 7 days' time. Then we go Imola, Silverstone, Hungary and Bahrain, back to back to back to back for our second break week. Then we have a 5-race bonanza to finish us off with some, again, very fun and very legendary circuits in there. COTA, the Circuit of the Americas in Texas. Then Suzuka, Las Vegas. That should be an interesting one. Brazil, and then Mexico to round us off. Since this is your first time as part of PSGL, PSF1 this season, Dan, what circuits on the calendar are you particularly looking forward to over the coming weeks?
COTA is a personal favourite of mine, and I can't wait to get that round underway when it comes. For me, that track is just a massive test of every part of a driver's technique, all the tricky braking zones and traction zones, and also that incredible last sector, which provides some of the best opportunities for wheel-to-wheel racing anywhere on the calendar. Of course, it's certainly not a calendar that I can complain about in its entirety. There's quite a lot of more historic circuits, not as many modern ones, with Vegas obviously being a big exception to that. But yeah, that's certainly not a point of contention for me. I love this calendar, but yes, COTA is a race and a track that stands out for me, and I can't wait to see this BSF1 grid take it on in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, we've got a little bit to wait until we get there, but like you said, we've got some incredible circuits coming up post the break week that we see in 7 days' time. But a week ago in Saudi Arabia was a very interesting one. We had a last lap battle for the win. We had 3 cars in contention right until the very last. If we have a look at the results from a week ago, it was Owen picking up his first win of the season, and Oscar making it back-to-back second places to give us a little bit of a gap between first, second, and then the rest in the Drivers' Championship, which we'll look at in a few moments' time as well. Tony Richet fumbled second place a little bit on the last lap, getting pocket pinched by Owen, or Oscar, sorry, I should say, right at the last gasp, and then Azam with a very solid performance to get himself a position number 4. And if we do skip over to the standards, you can kind of see what we're on about. In particular, Alex Lover, who won the season opener a couple of weeks ago around the Red Bull Ring, was absent 7 days ago in Saudi Arabia, allowing Owen and Oscar, both of whom finished on the podium in each of the first 2 races, to give themselves a little bit of breathing space. 7 and 10 points respectively. Good starts as well for Azam and Tony Roche, who wasn't here in week number 1 but came in strong with that third place. 16 drivers have got themselves on the board. Looking down the order, a couple of drivers that might be a little bit disappointed. Yasir Saki shows some really good flashes of speed, but only in 11th and a 10th for the Aston Martin driver. And the reigning champion, Mateo, sat there in 6th at the moment, wasn't here last week and had a bit of a quiet run to 4th in the opening round, but we know the promise that he has shown in recent seasons of PSGL. PSF1, what we've seen so far, Dan, this should be a really spicy championship battle, especially if we might be a little bit inconsistent with some of the attendances.
Yeah, that has certainly created that picture that you see in the opening couple of rounds, and actually, well, 3 of our top 6 drivers in the standings already have a non-start to their name. And of course, well, you've had 2 drivers who have been on the podium in both races, Owen and Oscar, and it's no surprise that they are leading the way at the moment, but certainly too early to come to any conclusions as it stands. And also, difficult, you would say, to look back into the past. Obviously, we've seen Matteo dominating PSF1 over the last few seasons, but this is a new game, new model, as you've alluded to many a time, I'm sure, over the first couple of rounds of this championship. But it does inevitably shake up the pecking order a little bit. We know that Owen has jumped up, we know Oscar's going well, and obviously Alex Lofer, possibly the fastest driver on PlayStation over a single lap at least at the moment. So there's a lot of talent moving up in the world, and there's a lot of drivers maybe who have thrived in the past who are yet to really show and establish how good they are on this game. But this race will tell us a lot more.
I do just want to touch on something you said, because obviously us two haven't spoken about it, but we have mentioned it in the past couple of weeks. These new game physics makes overtaking a lot harder. Dirty Air now actually exists, which it hasn't done for about 10 years on the F1 game. So you've got to pick your battles a little bit more. You've got to work harder for your overtakes, which means when you get them done, they can be a little bit more rewarding. We do also have to talk about the tyre temperatures. We've got to manage the tyres a lot more, and the engine temperatures as well. Sometimes we will see drivers quite frequently ducking out of the slipstream in some of the long straights just to get some cool air, get out of the turbulence, to give themselves maybe a little bit of an advantage later on in the stint. From what you've seen so far, Dan, do you think it's improved the racing? Do you think it's made it more interesting? Obviously, last year was very much just DRS games and ERS games. You could have like 15 people in one DRS train just trading blows all the time.
I think it's taken away some of the let's say more farcical elements of the racing, and well, I loved commentating races on the last game, but yeah, well, with cars running effortlessly within a couple of car lengths in front, it made for a lot of overtaking, quite a lot of incidents, and certainly some very entertaining races. But yeah, one thing that you must say about this new physics model is it's created races that have more elements to them, and that I think is wonderful. It tests different skill sets, and let's be honest, it's quite a lot more realistic. And what it has also done as a side effect, and I wanted to point this out because we've seen in both the first couple of races with Alex and with Owen, they led from the front consistently and held off the late attacks that came from behind from Oscar and Tony on those 2 occasions. So it's much more possible to run these races from the front. Of course, we saw how many times in the last couple of games have you seen a driver at the front on a DRS straight and they get absolutely swamped. You don't see as much of that nowadays, and it makes qualifying, which we're about to get into now, a little bit more vital in terms of setting up your race performance.
100%, and I hate to use a word like this, but the meta realistically on the last game was if you're in second place going on to the final DRS straight of the race, you're absolutely cooking. You're loving life, you're going to breeze past, especially if you've got a little bit of ERS, and it's going to be absolutely job done, one and done. But now it's not as easy. As you saw the last couple of weeks, we haven't seen that last lap overtake for the lead. We've seen battles just behind, drivers making mistake, pushing a little bit too hard in the dirty air, and it can be just that little bit easier to overdrive the car in the dirty air, struggling with the understeer, just pushing a little bit harder sometimes. You know, when you do overdrive, you just brake that little bit later, push the car wider of the apex, and those critical few tenths of a second are the difference between winning and not. We are loading into the session though. We have, thank goodness, got 20 drivers. We only had 16 7 days ago at Saudi Arabia, but all 20 here, and how could they miss out on the Spa-Francorchamps circuit here at the Belgian Grand Prix as we go through the first few corners of qualifying, the first few minutes of qualifying. We'll have a bit of a discussion because, Dan, this circuit, I mean, the superlatives you run out. Incredible to drive, incredible races we've had over the years. it is just, and this is the only word, legendary.
That is the only word, an icon in Formula One history and a favourite of not just these guys out on the circuit, but favourite of virtually anyone who's interested in F1 or even motorsport. It's like a mecca of this sport that we all know and love, and we're going to get into it watching these guys out there on the circuit. It provides some very unique challenges, very different challenge, I would say, now with the way that the F1 handling model has evolved over the last few years to what we've seen in the past. But we'll see these drivers take it on as we now get cars out on the circuit. So I'm sure you can probably hear my grin in my voice. I cannot wait to see these guys go at it out there. It is the longest circuit on the calendar, just about 7 kilometers long, and certainly a big challenge for these guys to overcome.
And in qualifying, obviously, if you are new to PSGL, 18-minute short qualifying session, with this being the longest lap on the calendar, if you want to get 3 runs in, you're going to have to get your skates on. On the previous game, we had a lobby reset between qualifying and the race. We had a few issues, let's say. We won't go into them in too much detail, but you would get your soft compound tyres back, which means you could burn all of them in qualifying with absolutely no cause for concern. In this game, we're not having lobby resets. They've got to treat these soft tyres like gold dust, and I would not be surprised if we see drivers just going for the 2 runs, because it can be a little bit sketchy if you go for 1 run, then you go for another used tyre run, and then you strap on a brand new set of softs come the end of the qualifying session. You are just playing with fire a little bit to make it all the way around.
And I can speak from experience as someone who's been in a league race round here, went for 3 runs and didn't make it over the line in time. So that is something you've got to watch out for. Of course, these drivers are much more in tune with their own strategy than I was on that occasion. But yeah, it does provide a different challenge, obviously, as a polar opposite, say, Austria, which we visited a couple of weeks ago, where you can essentially get as many runs in as you like. But we're about to get these laps underway. Zach Styler is the first driver over the line, and we're going to get this session finally fully kicked off.
The flash of lime green kicks Alba, cutting the beam to start the first final lap of the session. Charging down into La Source. Expect there to be a little bit of argy-bargy on the first lap, going through a very tight right-handed corner, then charging up to the infamous, I think it is now, Mo Rouge and Radion. That's not right. Eau Rouge and Radion. Yellow flags out already as some drivers just trying to back off, get a little bit of track space. And now your foot is absolutely buried in the floor of your Formula 1 car. You do not take your foot off the gas until you reach the braking zone of the Les Combes chicane. Try and get as much onto that curb as you dare. If you're a little bit too aggressive, though, they can spit you quite violently into the barriers. Into Brigiel's this long, endless, long right-hander down to third. Some drivers will take it in second just to try and get the drive and the bounce coming out of the corner. Then into No Name. Got to be careful with the gravel on the outside. Looking fairly clean so far from Zach Styler.
Heading into the midpoint of the lap then at Pouon, keeping it easily flat out. These cars generate a tremendous amount of downforce. You head up towards Fania and Campos corner, not getting into the apex I think as quick as he wanted to then, and trying to balance that rear of the car on the way out as he heads it through Stavelo. Watch the middle sector split. It's a 113.2. I think you might be seeing drivers dipping into the 112s through that first 2/3 of the lap. Now it's flat out. He's using virtually all of the battery. There's 2 massive full throttle zones on this track, and this is one of them as he gets up to around about 200 miles an hour, 320 kilometers an hour, onto the brakes, down into the bus stop second gear. Very difficult to control the traction on the way out. He squares up the rear of the car, pounces onto that throttle pedal, and he opens up with a 140.7. That's a solid bag of time, but we'll see how they compare. We know this man's quick over 1 lap. Tony Roche gets the better of that as the times come in.
Welcome back, Alex Lowe, for everybody. Straight away, 3.5 tenths on the head tops of everybody else. 140.3. That is a statement from the man that qualified on pole for the season opener, won that race as well. Wasn't quite as easy as he would have liked, but very impressive performance. And last week's winner, Owen, was the slowest of the times we've had so far, but Enzo Sabaton with a 41.3, not necessarily the most representative of times. It's Alex Lofer from Tony Roche and Zach Styler. Yasis Saki up into 6th place, matching Finlay, as Oscar now 2 second places so far this season, looking to go 1 better, slots into position number 2, but still a quarter of a second down as Lafferty and the V-Carb into 6th place. So you expect the times around Spa, with it being being such a long circuit and such a technical circuit, the times to just fan out a little bit. I don't think that's going to be the case. PSGL PSF1 is so competitive, especially in qualifying. These times are going to be incredibly, incredibly close. The reigning champion Mateo up into third, Lawrence slotting in just behind, and then his Mercedes teammate, Mercedes counterpart, slotting in 4 milliseconds behind Lawrence there. Rydell up to the line, but it is only P15 for the second Red Bull racing car.
Yeah, you'd expect the times to be relatively far out compared to any other track, but I'm fully with you. It's going to be competitive. It always is in this tier. But I tell you what, that has got to be a bit of a dagger in the heart to the rest of his competitors. Alex Lofer is more than 2 tenths of a second clear, closer to 2.5 tenths of a second. A 140.3 is a phenomenal time. By the way, he's already far under the PSF2 pole time. So that is a statement. And I said earlier on in the stream, this man might be the quickest man on PlayStation over a single lap, and certainly not proving me wrong so far. That is a stormer of a lap, very close to what I personally expected the pole time to be in the end. So that's going to take some beating already, and I think some of the drivers, see Oscar, Mateo, Lawrence, they put in solid bankers of their own. They'll know that I'm sure that they have time left, but they've got to assume the same is true for Alex Lofer, and that is a statement to make. Look at that gap.
Talk about needing absolutely no time to reacclimatise and warm up. Takes a week off, straight back in there, a quarter of a second clear of anybody else on the first round. And almost getting into the territory where, can he get into the 39s? I mean, that would be some serious wheels on that Red Bull car if he can get into the 39s. He might just decide, you know what? I can just sit this one out for the next 10 minutes. Just chill, have a cup of tea, just bolt on the set of soft tyres come the end of the session, go for one bonsai lap, because these drivers are going to have probably a couple of attempts to get, well, I say closer, to try and eclipse Alex Lofer right at the top of that timing board.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly how much each of these guys has left on the table and how much more they can do to execute that little bit better. Of course, these are banker laps, that phrase we use oh so often. There is much more to come, I imagine, as I'm watching a bit of a mock race down towards the bus stop on the end laps between Francesco Lago and Zinedine as they head towards the pit lane. So that's the first runs pretty much in the books. Everyone following virtually the same run plan so far as they head in, and a couple of drivers will be heading out very, very soon. And that's one I'd say slightly irritating side effect of Spa qualifying is that unlike a track like Austria or Zandvoort maybe, you do actually get lulls in the session as everyone dives to the pit lane. Now we see cars heading back out. So just under 8 minutes gone in the session. Alex Lofer, as we said, comfortably out in front, and certainly a mix of emotions there will be down that grid.
And you spoke about a lull, but there are some drivers that definitely have to try and make sure they get 3 runs in, because you don't want to go into that final lap of qualifying with the weight of the world on your shoulders, because you don't have a competitive or even any banker lap. If we're looking at Nico Source and Volokongan, both of whom failed to get a time on the board first time around. Track limit's not usually something you need to worry too much around here at Spa, but if you get a little bit lazy, maybe through Rouge and Radion, maybe through Poole as well, you can just pick up those corner cutting warnings. And of course, if you get 3 corner cutting warnings, that is a 3-second time penalty. Enzo Sabaton as well, way off the pace that we've seen so far from that Kick Sauber this season. 41.3, over a second down on Alex Lofer. He should be hoping to take probably 3/4 of a second out of that on his second flying lap. And Volokongan is Mr. Consistent in PSGL PSF1. I sound like a broken record saying it so many times, but last season competed in every single race and scored points in every single race, albeit didn't finish on the podium, picked up a couple of 4th places.
And Volokongan has been, for years, a force at the front of PlayStation League racing. And always consistent, always dependable. That has been the theme for years on end. And so I'd expect him to get a much better lap on the board. There's 9 minutes to go in the session. It already seems to be flying by. But pressure is on for some of these drivers just yet. And I absolutely agree. You need to go into that run with at least something solid, dependable to go off of, so you can really exploit those risks and go for broke on that final run. Alex, I think, is certainly going to be able to do that, as well as some of the chasing pack. But for these guys who are just coming over the line with lesser times on the board, these laps are going to mean plenty.
Enzo Sabaton, the main one. You can just tense up a little bit. When you make a mistake early on, find yourself a second down on the benchmark time. Like we said earlier, very easy to overdrive these cars. Just push that little bit too hard and just leak time all the way through the lap. We're going to see what his first sector split time is, unless he absolutely messed up last source. He's not going to be too different, and it is just 4 milliseconds down. But the middle sector, that is where the time is. On previous games, we're not too sure about it on this game, but you could see a little bit of a split setup. Some drivers trying to favour the advantage they can pick up in the middle sector by running slightly higher wings. Also will keep the tyres alive. The trade-off with that is you're slow in a straight line, and other drivers would favour the low drag setup, which means they'd be an absolute rocket ship on those straights, but just struggling in the middle sector, struggling in the dirty air as well if they're using the low drag setup on this game. And you chew the tyres just that little bit more. Gio in the chat, hello, Aura 5 from Adjuman. I assume that's talking about Alex Lofer, but Gio saying we should watch for the other Red Bull racing car of Rydal. Hasn't done too much to convince us of that so far, down in P16, 41 flat. Enzo Sabaton, good middle sector though, found nearly 0.4 of a second.
Now it is that full throttle run once again for the Kicksauber driver. You can see he's blipping that overtake button, trying to use the most of it all the way down. Again gets onto it out of launch one. Uphill run now. He's getting big straight line speed, so I think he's one of the drivers running lower wings as he flicks it in towards the bus stop chicane. Gets solid traction on the way out. You can hear the rear wheels chirping. That's much better. Puts him right in the mid pack, a 140.7, just 4,000 shy of Mario's formula. And Volikongan also alleviates some of that pressure on him by setting exactly the same time as the RB carb of Tony Richet, so 140.6. A lot of drivers are beginning to form around that point as the championship leader immediately gets himself on the board and straight up there too. Shy of Alex Lofer's time still, but yeah, for the Irishman that's a much more encouraging sign, as Tony Richet though manages to just better that time. So rivals already heading towards the front. Tony, of course, who's come very close to winning that last race in Jeddah, getting himself up there, but still they don't trouble Alex Lofer, who's going even quicker now, Tom.
What about the reigning champion though? Been bumped down into P6. The Aston Martin across the line only finds 1/10 of a second and remains in position number 6. His teammate Yasisaki up into P16. But we do return to Alex Lofer, who's up just a little bit in the middle sector, cutting the beam, lowers the benchmark even more. 40.2 this time, reasserts that 2/10 gap over anybody else behind him. Tony Richet, Owen Lafferty, and Oscar completing our top 5. I think Oscar will be a little bit disappointed. Was 1/10.5 up through the first couple of sectors. Had a bit of a rear lock, bit of a slide into the bus stop chicane, just lost that little bit of momentum, and that meant he didn't quite improve as much as he could have, and leaves himself with a little bit of work to do. The driver that's finished second in both of the Grand Prix so far. Somebody, Gia, was saying watch out for Ryder Abwell. Much more competitive time on the board for the second Red Bull racing car, 40.5 into P7. The two Mercedes have been bumped down as well. They didn't improve on their second attempt, still sat on a 40.601 and 40.605 respectively. Enzo Sabaton with that time had jumped up into the top 10, now down in P14. Mario's formula is out there, but not improving either.
Yes, so we're in the middle of these second runs at the moment, and I've seen a lot of invalidations across the board, really, from a lot of drivers who went out on that second run. So pressure is beginning to mount, and as you do start to push those boundaries, inevitably those mistakes, those errors start to creep in, and I'm not actually sure if I can see anyone that's on a full tilt lap at the moment. So Alex survives, and still his time from earlier on in the session, his banker lap, hasn't even been approached. And yeah, it does seem like he has an absolute reserve of 1 lap pace in that Red Bull, comfortably clear at the moment. I'm trying to see before some of these yellow flags clear themselves exactly how long is left in this session, because that clock is ticking down, and yeah, we should be drivers sending in the pits and trying to time that final run. It should be coming up very soon, but yeah, rather annoyingly, I can't quite see it right now.
Neither can I. Absolutely no idea how long we've got left. These drivers that are just cruising their way around, they could have 5 minutes to get back in the pits. They could have 30 seconds and they need to get turned around ASAP. Alex Lofer ambling his way back into the pits. Finished third in the championship last season, end of F1 24. Currently third in the standings, but with the caveat, of course, that he missed last week's Grand Prix. I just saw the timer. It was 4 minutes and 4 seconds. There we go again. We've got 4 minutes to go, so a couple of minutes of downtime, you would imagine. And it looks like every driver is going to comfortably be able to get 3 runs in this qualifying session, which is what we like to see, of course. It means we get maximum attack come the end of the session. Nobody maybe just leaving their cards slightly on the table, just being a bit conservative because they haven't got the confidence to know they have a banker lap time already under their belts. Is there anybody that you've got your eyes on that's slightly down the order? Yassis Saki sticking out to me, half a second down, P18 for the Aston Martin driver.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm watching SCI Fenley as well, who qualified extremely well in the opener in Austria, and certainly a driver I know well, and a driver who does have an abundance of one-lap pace. We'll be looking for far more. And, well, we have to point out is the man who is currently sat at the bottom of this session, I believe making his first appearance this season, Hazara, who currently sits very much at the bottom and very much detached from the rest of the grid if you look at the times. And, well, you'd have to imagine for a driver of his talent, he has far more on offer. And we talked about those second runs, how much they can mean in terms of getting that banker established, having a solid lap to fall back on. Hazara is one of those drivers who has a tremendous amount of pressure on him, so far caught adrift from the rest, and really at this point you do have to take those risks. But yeah, not having that lap to fall back on, it does, as we've said multiple times already, that does play on you.
I think what's really interesting is the two biggest gaps between drivers, the gap from 19th to 20th and the gap from 1st to 2nd. Now, I don't think it's that obvious that, or that common, sorry, that you see something like that occur. So just a nice little interesting note for us to keep an eye on to see whether that remains the case. It's very close. So if you look at the gap from 2nd place, Tony Roche, to Armateo in 6th, that is less than half a tenth of a second, covering 5 drivers around the longest circuit on the F1 calendar. Absolutely redonkulous stuff. Another driver that needs to get a bit of a shift on is Nico Source, down in 19th place, 0.6 of a second off the outright pole time at the moment, but probably needs to half that deficit, if a little bit more, just to try and get into the top 10.
You'll see him taking the widest possible lane to open up that lap, getting onto the overtake button, and away we're getting final runs started. Nico uphill braking into last source, right up towards the grass to open up that corner, locking up a little bit on the entry, getting onto that throttle pedal well. You can hear the tyres squealing on board. He is pushing the absolute limits, as are, I'm sure, all of the drivers out there, taking the shortest possible run up Erosion Radion. Now still on that overtake button again. You use that battery all in these 2 full throttle sections for the most part, trying to make the most of it. First sector time, is it quick? It is quick. It's a 30.1 as he takes as much curb as he dares, heading through the Lake Chicane and then through Malmedy at the highest point of the track. Downhill run now as we head into this horrible right-hander. It doesn't understeer quite as much as it did on the previous games, but he holds it together as he heads into no-name corners. Enzo Sabaton calls his session down there at La Source, but we'll keep an eye on Nico Sauce as he's now heading through Pone, again using the maximum width of the track. He is trying to push the boundaries, but isn't enough to move up the order.
Hustling that Haas, needs to try and get a little bit more time out of this middle sector through the Fagnes chicane, trying to stay as close as possible to the curbs. You can really understeer and get sucked towards the gravel on the outside of the second part into Stavolo corner again. Be careful of the gravel. He taps the gravel. He is up by 0.2 of a second, but he needs a bit more as he buries the right foot once again down into the floor of the Haas. Only the bus stop chicane left really to negotiate. Blanchimont is flat as you absolutely like. But I'm thinking Nico Source, I think he's just going to be a little bit down on the time that he needs. We'll see how he breaks down into the bus stop chicane, the final 2 corners of the circuit. He locks the rears, he drifts into the first part, and he gets all loosey-goosey through the second, and that is absolutely over for Nico Source. We return, though, to Tony Roche, who is 0.2 of a second up. Can he nab this right at the end of the session? The checker flag is out, cutting the beam. Tony Roche goes to the top of the timing charts by half a tenth.
Alex Lofer has got to try and respond to that. The first time he is usurped at the front of the session. Francesco Lago, final lap. We thought there were pace in the Mercedes, and the Italian has proved that. Goes third as Zem, goes to P8 in that Williams. I'm still keeping half an eye on the provisional pole sector. His middle sector is good, but it's not storming clear for Tony Roche as Oscar goes up at a 3rd place again. Mr. Consistent up at the front of this field. Times continue to come in. Dark improves to 6th. Matteo is 5th in Aston Martin. Alex Lofer, can he reclaim that place up at the front of this session? Down into the bus stop, keeps it in 3rd gear, now 2nd gear, trying to manage the traction on He's got about half a tenth of a second to make up, and he does! 140 dead, and Alex Lofer has gone back and overhauled Tony Roche. Owen in the Alpine, the championship leader, remains in P8, and I'm not sure Rydal is now down towards the end of the lap. Finlay is a little bit further along in that Haas Invalid though, and it doesn't look like Hazara is going to be sending anything massively competitive, so it's all on Rydal. He goes to P8, and I think that is the session. Tony Roche was able to topple Alex Lofer briefly, but in the end, as I said, an incredible driver over a single lap, and the Red Bull man has proven it yet again.
Pole in Austria, pole in Spa. It looked at one stage like it might be taken away from him right at the death. Tony Roche with a stormer of an effort himself, 40.1. Alex Lofer, though, couldn't quite get into the 39s, but he was damn close to doing so. 40 flat, brilliant once again from the Spaniard over one lap. Can he translate it into race pace, though? That is a little bit of a different question. Oscar, like you said, consistent as ever. Head of Francesco Largo in the reigning champion. Good late laps from Marius Formula and Dirk, respectively, 6th and 7th. Rydal, championship leader Owen, slightly down in P9, a third of a second off the pole time. Then Lafferty nestled inside the top 10. Lawrence Azam, Zach Stylers in 18. Volokonga down in P15. Enzo Sabaton 16th. Finlay 17th. Yasisaki Nikosos. And then Hazara right at the bottom of the field. That was quite the qualifying session, wasn't it? Times flip-flopping all the way through the session, but there was one constant right at the sharp end, and of course it was Alex Lofer.
It was indeed, and he has clear track ahead of him, looking down towards that apex of last source. We should be able to get the race underway very, very shortly. I do want to talk quickly about strategy, and I don't think this track is really anything unusual in that regard. Generally, you're going to see drivers starting on the mediums and switching over to the hards just before half distance, so I don't expect much deviation from that, but we'll see if anyone decides to throw a bit of a curveball in there. So keep an eye on that, as we've lost Zenit Zine. Hopefully he's able to find his way back in, but yeah, we should be getting the race underway very shortly. Alex Lofer again continuing his dominance, looking for a second win of the season, and we know it's easier to lead from pole in this game compared to the last game, but I imagine still he has plenty of threats coming from behind.
It is, but this is one of the circuits where starting from pole doesn't necessarily provide you that much of an advantage. Yes, it is a very short run down to turn number 1 of La Source. Tight as well, so the drivers behind can potentially trip over themselves and leave you absolutely scampering off into the distance. But if they do keep it nice and clean, there is that long, flat-out run up through Eau Rouge and Radion, down the Kemmel Straight. And if you have got slightly higher wings, you are going to get gobbled up down into the Lake Combe chicane. That's what Alex Lofer's got to be careful of. He's got to absolutely blitz it coming out of turn number 1. Otherwise, he could just leave himself with a little bit of work to do in the opening couple of laps.
Slipstream not quite as powerful on this game as it has been in the past, but well, how many times have you seen that lead change hands on the first lap? Yeah, that's certainly something to look out for the Red Bull driver, and yeah, getting traction out of La Source imperative. We'll see how he gets on. Tony Roche will be chasing. It feels like Tony Roche, I mean, he was chasing all day back in Jeddah. Is he going to see the same fate this time around, or will he be able to find that top step of the podium? These are the questions that must be answered as we hopefully get the race underway. Here we go!
The lights counting up. Who can do battle in Belgium? It's Alex Lofer that will lead us away. 5 lights away racing at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. Good start for the pole sitter. Tony Roche trying to duck underneath the rear wing of the Red Bull. Battle going on behind us. Francesco Largo tries to hang it around the outside of Oscar. And now for the next 30 seconds, you are absolutely flat out. And Alex Lofer has done precisely what he needed to do. Blitzed it out of turn number 1. And he's got 0.4 of a second at the moment in his back pocket. But Tony Roche, brilliant run over the curbs through Eau Rouge and Radion. Halves it almost. Coming up now, he's gaining. He's gaining all the time. Alex Lofer realises the threat, has to move over to the middle of the circuit. Can the RB just get the overlap? No, can't quite find his way around the outside. Armate was thinking, just dangling the nose of that Aston Martin up the inside of Francesco Largo into the Lake Combe chicane, but it's all even Stevens out in front. Francesco Largo with a bit of a wobble though coming through Rivage.
As now we head downhill into the middle of the lap. Alex Lofer leading away as, look at this, heading into none. There's cars everywhere as Owen forces his way through on Lafiti, places then Azem going through, and the Williams, the RB drops back down the order. The kick Saubers are getting involved with each other. There are a couple of hard starters. Marius Formula is by far the best placed of those. So keep an eye on that Alpine if he can hang with the drivers in front. As we head through Fanya, it does seem to be beginning to calm down. Still, the Kick-Sauber is very, very close. As Enzo Sabaton, I wonder, as he was losing places, doesn't appear to have any major damage, although his teammate does. So that is one victim of the first lap, Zach Styler, who, well, has had a bit of a tumultuous start to his run here. He is going to potentially come into the pits. As you can see, there was still battling out in front, or behind rather. It is relatively calm up at the front, but as expected, it's pandemonium in the midfield.
Dirk in P11 shadowing every move pulled by Lafferty down to the braking zone of the bus stop chicane. Zach Styler does indeed stay out. Going to give him an absolutely monstrous advantage on the straights with the limited front downforce. In fact, he's dangling the nose of the Kick-Sauber up the inside of Lawrence down to turn number 1. I think he's managed to muscle his way past the Mercedes, and Lawrence is going to be absolutely steaming from ear to ear about that because he was pocket pinched into the braking zone. Didn't quite see the assault coming from the Kick-Sauber. With the DRS enabled, there's an opportunity if he can get a good run through Rouge and Radion, which, check it off, that is what he's got. He's got to battle away there with a car that has limited front downforce. Going to make him a bit speedier in a straight line, but if Lawrence can be brave under brakes, which he should be, considering the car on his inside is compromised. But look at this from Zach Styler. Hangs it all the way around the outside, doesn't even need the right-hand end plate of the front wing, and Lawrence is firmly put in his back pocket.
And he is fuming, you can tell. He's even looking at the inside into Bruxelles. Can't quite manage it. There's more battling it behind as Enzo Sabaton and Yassir Saki going side by side, and they bang wheels too on the run towards Pool. You cannot run off this circuit. Yassir is forced out there. Volakongan is trying to force his way around the outside. I know these are for places outside of the points, but it is just too action-packed down there at the moment, and it does give some of the drivers in front time to establish themselves. Dirk is trying to check out from the likes of Zach Styler, still compromised with the damage. His pace does seem fairly solid though. Up at the front, again, it is a picture of serenity compared to the chaos at the back. Alex Lofer leads comfortably from Tony Roche, and they're just settling into that rhythm as the chaos all kicks off behind.
Oh, Oscar not troubling the apex of turn number 20, the second part of the bus stop chicane, and drops to 0.6 of a second off the back of Tony Roche, despite sailing the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. DRS laps open on the short run out of the final corner and into turn number 1. Ryder now chucks it up the inside of Marius Formula into turn number 1. That is job done. Signed, sealed and delivered, and 6th place taken off the hands of the Alpine, who is still grappling for grip, you would imagine, on the cold, hard compound tyres. Now he's going to get a face full of dirty air up through Rouge and Radion, cascading over the hill, but he's managed to stay glued to the rear wing of the Red Bull Racing car, and it could be an opportunity to try and get this position back. Further behind, it's Dirk and Lafferty still sinking their teeth into one another. Not enough of space left on the inside for the Scarlet Ferrari car, and now they make contact off the circuit. Falls the RB of Lafferty, but keeps hold of the position. That wasn't particularly kind and orderly between the RB and the Ferrari, but it's Lafferty that holds on ahead of the Ferrari, who's crucially on the hard compound tyres. One of the stewards post-race might have a little bit to say about that. Slight tete-a-tete between the pair of them. In fact, Lafferty lets the Ferrari go through, so good sportsmanship there.
Good sportsmanship, but it's a double cost of that because that has detached him from the DRS train, and doing so as well as giving up the possession as Lawrence finally is able to pick off Zach Styler and put that Kick-Sauber back in his rear view mirrors. Now he's got to try and charge off after the cars in front. He's 8/10 adrift of Lafitte up in front, but Lafitte again very sportsmanlike, as you say. He's now put a lot of pressure back onto the man he just let through to try and bridge back across to that leading train. 1.3 seconds is the difference for Dirk to make up, and well, you may have seen on the previous games as the Kick-Sauber swap places, you may have seen on previous games DRS relays passing each other lap after lap, and being able to come across to a group in front much more difficult to do on this game because of the aforementioned dirty air, weaker slipstreams. You don't get as much of an effect, and so Dirk may have to do this largely on his own in 1.5 seconds to a train that's being led along by Alex Lofer. That doesn't sound like a very strong proposition. That's going to be a tough gap to close.
You almost imagine he would have wished that Lafferty actually stayed in front of him. Yes, he was run off the circuit and took the place off the track, but now it's left them with quite the mountain to climb to try and get back into contention. The two Kick-Saubers, I believe, are going to do battle once more. Enzo Sabaton, a 10.5 ahead of his teammate, who's absolutely flying over the hill through Eau Rouge and Radion corner and should be taking this place back. Positions trading further forward. The Alpine swapping places, as do, I think it was Armateo and Francesco Largo. Zach Styler.
Yes.
Down the inside of his teammate. Enzo Sabaton's going to try and hang it out there. No, it's Zach Styler on the outside. My apologies. Enzo Sabaton holds firm in 13th position. Volokongan a little bit balked by that. Further forward, though, Armateo and Francesco Largo having it out very nicely around the outside of No Name Corner. That's not a place you particularly see overtakes very often. They're still neck and neck as they come down towards Poole, but it's the Aston Martin that flies through, and the flash of British Racing Green sees Francesco Largo fall off the circuit through Poole, and now he's going to have his mirrors full with the Red Bull of Rydenau.
You can see in full effect that dirty air coming into play as soon as Francesco Largo found himself on the same line as the Aston Martin in front through Poulon. That Mercedes just went straight on. But that battle, as glorious as it was, has again put pressure on Matteo to try and stay with the group in front. He's shown typically great racecraft here. Now he's got to work hard to consolidate that move into 4th place. That gap teetering on the edge of that 1 second range, that magical number as they cross the detection point. I don't think he's going to have it. He's going to have to work hard heading through the bus stop chicane. He's got very little battery to work with too, so Armateo trying to salvage his chances up at the front of this race. Again, he's on that overtake button. The gap is hovering right on that 1 second. It's going to come down to the run heading out of La Source. He aggressively turns it into the apex, punches that throttle pedal. That's a very, very good run. Is work too hard to try and punish him, and Matteo, he got the move done and just about held on to the 3 cars in front. Great work.
Aided a little bit as well by Oscar, just microscopically missing the apex of turn number 1, compromising him ever so slightly. That rear wing flap is open for Armateo, but falls outside a second once more. Francesco Largo might be falling out of 5th place because to the inside goes Rydenau. He's going to try and hold it up the inside. Francesco Largo, for the second time in as many laps, falls off the circuit. Maybe he's starting to struggle with the temperatures of those the front medium tyres on the car. And this has not been an impressive past couple of laps for Francesco Largo. Mugged by Armateo as he fell off the circuit through Poole, and then 60 seconds later through the Les Combes chicane, well, put up absolutely no fight at all.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be much grip, especially in the front of that Mercedes. It seems to be understeering quite badly out there on the circuit, and he's got to try and just hang on for all of his worth and stay with the cars in front. We're talking about tyres going off. I'm seeing Mario's formula. He did have to ship a couple of possessions on the last couple of laps, but he does seem much more competitive and does have quite a lot of battery to use as well. Dirk as well, managing to work his way back across actually to the group in front, and I think that is a tell. We are seeing a bit of a crossover in price. The hard tyres, of course, you have to suffer, as you said, with colder temperatures in the early laps, not quite getting as much grip, but as the mediums start to go off, potentially start to overheat, the likes of Mario's formula and Dirk are working themselves back into this race, looking much stronger now on those hard tyres. Of course, they're going to be extending longer, but they're making them work for the time being, and yeah, the medium runners starting to come under pressure as we hit lap 6.
Poor run through the bus stop from Dirk, but equally poor for Lafferty, who still remains outside of a second and doesn't, crucially, have the DRS flap open at the back of the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls car. He's going to have a good run out of La Source corner. It's hovering, teetering on the edge of being inside 1 second and being out of it. I think he is just going to get the DRS as they go over the detection point, and well, alarm bells can just be lowered for Lafferty, but it's Dirk that might be in a little bit of danger here. As we go over the line, he does get that rear wing flap open, but he's not helped by the fact that the drivers in front are very, very equidistant and very, very closely matched. Marius Formula is just 0.2 of a second off the back of Owen. Asm only 0.3 of a second off the back of Marius, and that is just leaving Dirk with a little bit of added work to do if he's just going to cruise up to the back of the leading DRS train once more. We have got another break, which is between Lawrence and Volokongan, who's managed to battle his way past the dueling kick salvers. Zach Styler, remember, still has that little bit of front wing end plate damage, but is soldiering on, albeit down in P15. Things just starting to stabilise a little bit as well. Marius Formula just 0.4 of a second off the back of his teammate. Owen got by a couple of laps ago. Will we see them trade blows once again, as Dirk is the first to pick up a 3-second corner cutting penalty?
And he does make a bit of a mess of the Fania chicane too, to add to that misery out there. It's not a track where you typically expect to see a whole lot of time penalties for track limits. It is, of course, a very strong possibility, as Dirk has demonstrated already, but I think that could be very costly if the field stays as bunched up as it is, because I would not expect most of the drivers to be picking those up. We will see, of course. We are still very early in this Grand Prix and a lot can change, and all change at the front too. Oscar being put to the sword a little bit by the drivers in front. Alex Lofer and Tony Roche, they are running very, very comfortably. We saw they were worlds apart in qualifying, and they are continuing on there and putting the pressure on the drivers behind. And even further down the field though, we have a man in the pits, and it's probably not the Kickserver we expected to see in the pits early on, but Enzo Sabaton, a few laps earlier than I would have thought. Had pit stops of going down between about lap 8 and 10. Maybe we'll see a few more in this lap, but he's the first driver to get the hard tyres on. And to be fair, if you're running near the back of the train, trying to gain a bit more track possession, not a bad idea. We'll see how it works for the Kickserver as he emerges and goes very far over the pit exit line. He gets back on the circuit, and we will see how this undercut works.
Zach Styler, his teammate, continuing to have a slightly demonstrous performance as he drops a couple of places from 14th to 16th. Yasisaki and Finlay both helping themselves with the front wing damage that the Kick-Sauber is currently suffering from. They're 2.5 seconds off the back of Volokongan, who, since getting ahead of the two Saubers, has been lightning quick and is another driver on the hard tyres that's managed to cruise back onto the scene and get within the 1 second window of the DRS train in front. And that leading train goes all the way from Alex Ofer down to this Papaya McLaren in P13. So I'm surprised that we haven't seen any breaks in the DRS train that have managed to withstand the test of time from first down to 13th place. And it has really been Zach Seiler who's been struggling with the front wing. That's been the main cork in the bottle that's just been pushing drivers further back in the field away from this leading fight. I think we are just in the stage of drivers just managing these medium compound tyres now, making sure they can get them to the pit window lap, which should be coming in the next few turns.
Yeah, I would imagine we might see a few drivers darting towards that pit entry, and Tony Roche is going to demonstrate that. He comes in, as does Oscar just behind, so we're seeing a number of drivers coming into the pits, and this is where we may see changes in track position, of course, and potential breaks in the DRS train can be formed here, as they were last time out in Jeddah. So hard tyres going on for some of our race leaders. Tony Roche a bit further down the pit lane, he's going to emerge from that pit box, get underway, and now we're going to see how his pace on the outlap compares to Alex Lofer's out front, who is already burning off his battery and is surely going to respond to that at the end of this lap. So now the drivers emerge. Tony Roche is going to have to work quite hard with Oscar just teetering on the edge of that 1 second. These two are going to go at it. They've gapped some of the rest of the drivers out there, but yeah, you can see this is where gaps tend to open up. So we had a fairly unbroken DRS train. Now we're going to see some breaks and changes in track position. Alex Lofer out in front, he is going all in, trying to sustain that front position, coping with those guys who have gone for that undercut.
Couple of trades in position as well. Volokongan is absolutely flying on those hard compound tyres. He's just managed to steamroller past Lawrence to get up into 7th place on the circuit. And Owen and Francesco Largo, both of them just come out of the pits, the Alpine, with a really good run and a lovely bit of slipstream coming down the Kemmel straight, getting past the Mercedes of Francesco Largo into P13. Oscar was very lucky as well. He was almost perpendicular to the white line. 90 degrees sideways nearly coming out of the pit lane, just trying to get as much heat as possible into the rear tyres and get those hard tyres nice and toasty, nice and warmed up, because on this game they can be slightly challenging to get temperature in them, but the front tyres in particular through the middle sector, you should have no qualms getting those up to temperature. And will Alex Ofer respond? Armateus just taking a couple of tenths out of him in the middle sector. The reigning champion continues on. That is not what the pole sitter does though. Alex Ofer making his way down pit road. Rydal of course have to stay out, being the sister Red Bull car. Marius Formula continues on, as does Dirk on the hard tyres, let's not forget.
So into the pits, we're going to see how these guys filter back out. Alex Lofer now getting back up to speed gradually. We'll have a look for Tony Roche. He's just heading towards the braking zone of last source. Oscar's done a great job of rescuing the situation. He's right there with him, and Alex Lofer is going to emerge, and there is the difference. He's going to have to work very, very hard to stay in that DRS range, but it looks like he is just about going to manage it, burning off the last of his battery. So he does sacrifice a little bit of track possession, but he does have fresher tyres, and he does have DRS, crucially, as Oscar closes up to the back of Tony Roche. So now Alex Lofer is transitioning to being the hunter rather than the hunted, and that delta, we'll see how it works out. 2 positions lost, but a lap fresher tyres. How did Tony Roche and Oscar manage that minuscule tyre disadvantage? Alex Lofer is going to have to get moves done if he wants to convert another pole position. Let's see.
Owen, the championship leader, going to be cursing that as well. 1.2 seconds off the back of Alex Lofer. If the Red Bull was just ever so slightly slower in that pit window phase, Owen would be back into the DRS and confirming himself as one of the perennial contenders to try and win the Belgian Grand Prix. Make it back-to-back victories for the Enstone Alpine team. As it stands, got it down to 1.1 seconds, 1.2 hovering around that number. He's going to have to do the work all by his own to get himself into that DRS train of the leading 3 cars, and he might be helped by the Williams of Hazara, who is going to continue to soldier on his hard compound tyres. Tony Roche has just cruised up to the back of the Williams, and there is a little bit of traffic that the race leaders, the net race leaders of course, are going to have to deal with, as Mateo is now making his way into the pits. Is he? No, he's not. He stays out once more. I thought that Aston Martin was in the pit lane.
Very much going off strategy then as the reigning champion, as now Tony Roche closes right up to the rear wing of the Williams of Hazara, and this is where potentially, if you time and overtake well, you can gain a big advantage here. And still though, Tony Roche, perhaps wisely, is going to wait. He's going to bank on that DRS run up towards Les Combes on that Kemmel straight. What it does do is it allows the rest of the drivers to close up, and they are all swarming all over the rear wing of the Norwegian. As now, I imagine Tony Roche is going to waste no time, gets out of that slipstream immediately. Now DRS up, watch for Oscar though, he's going to go. He draws alongside Tony Roche and he does back out of it. Alex Lofer was able to find his way through. A shocking moment as Oscar picked his way through and threaded the eye of the needle, but he does remain in that same position. Alex Lofer crucially managing to follow through. Owen and Francesco Lago though were too far adrift, and now they have to deal with the Williams driver, and if he's going to lose time, it's going to be in this technical middle sector, Tom.
100%, and the dirty air is going to kick in, and look at this, Owen now tucked up underneath the rear wing of the Williams, and having just got into the 1 second window of the trio in front, as Francesco Lago, not for the first time, falls off the circuit going through Poole. Look at this, it's going to be down into the Fagnes chicane. Owen on the button there, he needed to get that overtake done. He gets the overtake done, disposes of the Williams, and can now try and continue his charge back up to the Red Bull racing car of Alex Lofer to keep himself in the game. What about Francesco Lago? Still stuck behind the Williams, his Mercedes engine counterpart, a 10th.5 as they come through Stablo, and now through the kinks of the final few corners up towards the bus stop chicane. He is going to cruise past, but he has lost himself a little bit of time, and in turn, he's now out of the DRS range of Owen.
Naz teetering on the edge of that 1 second range as well, so a couple of big corners needed from Francesco Lago. Of course, Owen is not going to be holding anything back. He is going to be charging up there too as the championship leader, but there's another car to contend with. It is SCI Finley, and he and Lafitte are battling it out just in front of the net race leaders. Tony Roche is having to pick his way past. His teammate will provide no resistance, and now Oscar trying to follow through, once again pinned up against the wall as he heads to the outside into Eau Rouge. Just about gets the move done. Absolute heart and stuff for the McLaren drivers. Tony Roche pulls to the outside, he'll dispose of Finley easily. Look at Alex Lofer though, challenging to the inside of Shazuru Oscar as they barrel into Les Combes. Finley's going to box the McLaren in here as round the outside matches up position 6 on the road. Brilliant racecraft. Oscar was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He manages to find his way through in the very next corner. Tony Roche, meanwhile, is taking full advantage. He is trying to check out. Alex Lofer trying to reclaim that. Owen next up to challenge Finley. It's not going to happen there, but Alex Lofer, talk about car positioning. That was exquisite. He picks off Oscar, and now he's working his way back towards the net race leader, Tony Roche.
How's your luck, Oscar? Found himself bottled up behind the Haas. Didn't quite have the straight line speed to get past him. Lafferty was the one tumbling through the field on his ailing medium compound tyres. And look at this. Owen couldn't do what he did on the previous turn. Massive slide for Finlay coming through Stavler, but still Owen is glued to the rear wing, the rear diffuser of that Haas, finding any possible opportunity. Come on, get on with it, he says, as he finally roars past, but to his detriment, he's lost half a second and once again is out of contention. You would imagine Oscar too, just struggling in that middle sector. Tony Roche and Alex Lofer both critically started to stretch their legs, and Oscar I don't think is going to get DRS down the main straight, albeit a short straight, but he's got to get his skates on because he could get pushed out of contention for the win here.
I'm checking on Mateo because he's still deciding to extend on these medium tyres, and he is just hemorrhaging lap time out there. And in fact, Tony Roche is working himself to being within a couple of seconds of him on the road. So Mateo has went for a bold strategy, does not seem to be paying off, as the cars behind charge up to the back of him, and he could actually be another spoiler in this battle. Yeah, as you said though, for Oscar. Well, it's another blow to his chance in this race, being dusted on the previous lap, and now he has no battery to use, virtually no battery. At least he ran out down the Kemmel Straight. He recharges some under braking, of course. He is really on the edge here in terms of his fight up at the front of this race. On the edge of that 1 second gap, and I imagine he's going to be praying for a saviour in the defending champion Armateo. So Tony and Alex close up to him once again, and maybe catching Dirty Air is just going to allow Oscar to work his way back in, but he's got some work to do still, as now Armateo on ailing medium tyres is now caught by the net race leaders.
And just to bring this to your attention, everybody, it's raining. You can see the streaks on the halo of the Red Bull of Alex Lofer. Maybe this is why Armateo's tried to hang it out all the way, because he knew the rain was coming, but he's got himself into a position where it's not quite come fast enough, and he's going to get overtaken by the net race leaders. Here comes Tony Richet, the smallest of opportunities perhaps to go around the outside, but couldn't quite fit an RB alongside the Aston Martin. Flat through Blanchimont, those medium tyres are well past their best. Which way are we going to go? Armateo hangs it in the middle of the circuit. Tony Richet has to dive to the inside, gets through, scrabbling for grip is the Aston Martin of Armateo, who dives for the pit lane. What tyres does he put on though? If the rain is coming down, surely he can't be putting on the hard compound tyres at this stage of the Grand Prix. Only time will tell. Lafferty in the other RB is out there on the intermediate tyres, so we'll have to wait and see what his sector times are looking like. Armateo, yes, puts on the green striped intermediate tyres. We have a race in our hands, everybody. Tony Richet catching Volokongan, catching Dirk, catching Mario's Formula. But if they can extend this just a couple more laps, they become the race leaders. As Volokongan, is there an opportunity to perhaps send it up the inside into the Lake chicane? No, it is not, and they continue to be line astern first, second and third.
I have to say, what a phenomenal charge it's been for Volokongan, because he was a long way behind these two at the beginning of the first stint, and he has closed up to them. So the McLaren driver, the Norwegian, always on the charge and race trim and moving his way through. But yeah, this rain does throw a spanner in the works, and you'd have to say a lot of these medium runners, their hand was just forced. They could not extend the tyres any further, and they've had to come in what is, I'm sure, is far earlier than they would have wanted. We'll see how quick the transition point is going to be, but I'm keeping an eye on that gap between Armateo and Nico Sauce just in front of him. It is still extending rapidly, so we are certainly not at that crossover point just yet, and the drivers who have pitted onto the hards from the mediums reel in the hard starters. This is a fascinating dynamic in this race. Tony Richet closing up towards three cars much slower and on much older tyres. Will they decide to come in early? It doesn't seem like that crossover has come just yet though, Tom.
And Owen in hot pursuit of them as well. That gap had grown to 2.1 seconds between Oscar and Owen. Now down to 1.5. And if Tony Richet, Alex Lofer and Oscar do get caught behind the leading trio of Mario's Formula, Dirk and Volokongan, who are of course yet to pit, that means we're going to have a 7-car scrap. Oscar has gone what I think is slightly early there. Armateo has lost 1.5 seconds in the middle sector alone to Nico Sauce. It is the green stripe medium tyres for the Papaya McLaren. He's trying to steal a march on his rivals, but has he made the right call?
I'm really not sure. I mean, the conditions can evolve on this lap. Hazara comes in as well, but his hand was more for on older hard tyres. Oscar, who was running in the fight for the win, has taken a massive gamble. He should have no problem at least heating up those tyres. He may have a bit of a problem controlling those temperatures, of course, but you can see, don't forget, he was behind Matteo when Matteo came into the pits, and already he's gapped the Italian to the tune of 4 seconds. So that is how much these enters have been struggling. They will be getting better all the time, but still those slicks, they run with solid grip out there. The other side of that, of course, is that when they do lose grip, slicks and wet conditions, they lose it very quickly, and the lap times fall off a cliff. And so timing that moment is going to be imperative for all those drivers running at the front now.
And Oscar is dropping time to Nico in front of him. Not too much time, not as severe as it was for Armateo on the previous lap, and he's actually fairly decent through Rivage and Brigel's corner. So Oscar is just keeping tabs on the group in front. I think he has gone a lap too early because it's just hovering. Now extends a little bit as they go through Poole, and those front tyres screaming for mercy as they skyrocket in temperature. Tony Richet fancies an opportunity. Will it be around the outside of Blanchimont corner? You bet it's around the outside of Blanchimont corner. Volokongan on the ailing hard compound tyres. Alex Lofer says, I want a piece of this action. He's going to get right into the thick of it. Volokong and perhaps wisely backing out of that one. It's a race to the pit. In goes Dirk, in goes Tony Rocher as well. I think it almost caught out Alex Lofer and caught out Volokongan. They've made the call that the intermediate tyres are the compound you want to be on. Marius continues on, as does Owen as well. That's going to be interesting when the Alpines come into the pits. They could tango in the pit lane because they are fairly close together, 3 seconds a gap, so Owen will feel the effects of the double stack ever so slightly. But where is Oscar in relation to Tony Rocher? He's lost about 8/10 of a second to Nico Source on this lap alone. Tells you that the intermediate tyres are not quite ready, and this could be, well, a sight for sore eyes for Oscar, because there, away off in the distance, are his main rivals.
Yeah, you can see that plainly, and say Tony Rocher is up the road. He's now got to try and adapt, though, to these new conditions, and he has Nico Sauce on the slicks behind him. What an extraordinary race situation this is. Tony Rocher working his way through. We can get a very good reference to where the grip of the intermediates is. I have to say it's looking pretty good. I think that crossover is beginning to occur. Of course, he does have fresher tyres underneath him, but Tony Rocher, at the very least, as well as Dirk in front of him, petted in from that log stint on the hards to start the race. They seem very, very strong on these intermediates, and I think race engineers everywhere are going to be calling in their drivers to come in at the end of this lap. I think now is the time, and I think you're going to see a very busy pit lane at the end of lap 15 here.
You say that, but just to counter it, Nico still stayed within, well, now he's dipped under half a second between himself and Tony Rocher, and it's getting closer all the time. Alex Lofer helps himself to the lead of the Grand Prix, passing Marius Fulmer, still out there on his hard compound tyres that he started the Grand Prix on. I still don't think it's quite ready. If we go on board, there's not really any splashes and sploshes of water. They're pretty big spots, and Alex Lofer has decided he's going to continue on once more, even though he has a massive tail wag and snap of oversteer coming through the bus stop. Diving into the pits also goes Volokongan and Azim. This is fascinating, isn't it? Different tyre strategies. When is it ready for the intermediates? The track still looks fairly dry.
What I'm very fascinated with is what is going to happen to the rain intensity. I have been involved in and commentated plenty of league races where the rain has come, but it hasn't intensified. It stayed like this, and the slicks are very usable all the way to the end. So let's see if that's going to be the case. Look at this as they emerge from the pit lane. I think it's certainly pretty much equalised. Mario's formula now. Got pressure from Tony Rocher. Rise to squeeze his way through. Round the outside of surges further forward in this race. He's picked a very good time to come into the pits in terms of, well, in terms of self-preservation at the front of the net race, but I do wonder up at the front, let's see what's going to happen. If the rain does continue to intensify, then, well, the intermediates are of course going to be the only usable tyre, but if it stays as it is right now, could some of these drivers, I wonder, be thinking about extending those hards all the way to the checkered flag? As you said, Tom, this is an incredible sight to see as these drivers, both their skills and their brains are being tested to the limit. But let's see what happens to this rain. Is it going to hold firm, or is it going to get worse and force these hard runners' hand?
I'm just trying to watch on board with Nico Source. He's the main driver that's going to give us an idea of the comparison between the hard tyres and the intermediates, and still he is staying in the ballpark. He's staying in the fight with the drivers that have strapped on the brand new intermediates. It does look a little bit sketchy as he doesn't trouble the apex at all through Stabilo, and now with a massive slide of oversteer as well. Is this the time? Are the teams that haven't pitted their drivers going to be calling them in? Yes, Alex Lofer on the buzzer. He is into the pits along with Owen. Francesco Largo's in. Ryderdal in an unfortunate position because he has to stay out courtesy of his teammate Yasser Saki and Enzo Sabaton also staying out. They're preying on the rain not intensifying. Zinedine's out there a minute off the back of everybody else on medium tyres. That's an interesting one there for the Ferrari. Bit of a classic Ferrari strategy there. But we return to the winner in round number 1. Will he be the winner in round number 3? He's got to be careful because Dirk is technically the net leader of the drivers on the intermediates. Alex Lofer's still clear of the Scarlet Ferrari. Owen spat out of the pits right into the path of his team, and it could be battle between the end zone teammates going up through Eau Rouge and Radion corner. Marius Fulmer almost pushing his teammate through the kinks of turns 2 and 3 and 4. But look at this, DRS. The DRS is still enabled. I didn't realise that as well. He's onto the grass in his attempts to get past his teammate. And he's going to roar around the outside of Owen, who's still looking to try and get the inters up to temperature.
Oh, my timing tower lit up there as there was 3 separate overtakes heading down the Kemmel Straight. DRS, as you said, still very much activated and still providing opportunities to get those moves done out there. But yes, Mario's Formula and Owen, the 2 Alpine boys going at it, tracking Tony Roche, who, yeah, maybe that was just a touch too early. Now he's dealing with a tyre disadvantage too. Maybe it doesn't make quite as much difference in the wet. We've got a yellow flag down there at No Name Corner. Not sure who got caught up there. It might have been Armateo, I'm not quite sure, but he seems well out of contention, it must be said, in this Belgian Grand Prix, as we got another spinner. That's Hazara, who's got no front wing on that Williams car, so it's been a nightmare scenario for the Norwegian driver. As we now approach the final 5 laps of the Grand Prix, Ryder Daly was forced to extend on the last lap, chooses to extend on this lap, and you'd have to say at this point with the intermediates, well, at this point, if you haven't pitted for the inters already as Yasuyasaki comes in, Enzo Sabaton stays out, as Ryder going for the bold strategy that I mentioned and trying to extend those hards in extremely treacherous conditions to the end of the race. If these conditions hold, he may have every chance, but we'll see, but the inter runners are already coming.
Penalty for Francesco Largo. Not good news for the Mercedes, although he is down in P15. Now a 10-second penalty and a retirement, so we're snowballing quite severely there. Ryder down with 11 seconds in hand over Enzo Sabaton, who I think is going to get gobbled up by Alex Lofer. The DRS, I believe, is still active. Yes, the rear wing flap opens. Dirk could also get gobbled up by a couple of cars. Tony Roche trying to catch the driver. He was scrapping within the opening salvos. Gets past Dirk up into P4. Alex Lofer actually unable to get past Enzo Sabaton. Hazara's out of the race as well. The 2 Alpines battling once more, dueling over 6th and 7th. This time, Owen snatches the place back from his teammate through the Les Combes chicane. Asma, a very willing spectator behind. We haven't spoken too much about the Williams, but got himself into a decent position thanks to a good call on the strategy, switching over to the intermediate tyres. Dirk, though, I'm surprised he got mugged so easy. Now he's in the gravel coming through No Name Corner.
And Owen will be certainly licking his lips, seeing the Ferrari in front, who does have older tyres and inevitably a little bit less grip to work with. Up in front, Alex Lofer is hassling that kicks over Enzo Sabaton through Fania, looking for any which way through. He's got so much more grip, but unable to utilise. There he goes to the outside of Savalo, forced onto the curb of this car. Both cars sent side, and through goes to Alex Lofer in the end, unable to quite pull off that manoeuvre as he intended. He's trying to charge his way back immediately as he's going to make it 3 abreast on the run towards Blanchimont. Both drivers who flung out of the slipstream of Enzo Sabaton decided against that in the end, as we'll see if they do continue. Up in front, Ryder is certainly continuing. That says a lot about what his approach to the end of this race is, but his chances of the win have just been bolstered by what we've just seen from Enzo Sabaton. Tony and Alex look like they'll finally pick their way through. Alex Lofer to the inside will hit last, get his way past the kick and he will be swapped too by the other cars, but that whole kerfuffle has given Ryder on this insane strategy just a little bit more hope with 4 laps to go.
Oh, and Owen tries to hang it around the outside of Enzo Sabaton. Throw Rouge and Radion. That's crazy stuff. Enzo Sabaton with a penalty. Alex Lofer's getting pocket pinched again. Through goes Dirk, who fancies an opportunity to take his 2nd place away from Tony Roche. Where has this come from? He's turned the afterburners on around the outside of the first part of Les Combes. Tony Roche gets his elbows out and just about repels the assault from the Ferrari. And Alex Lofer thinking, I want to piece the action once more on the run down into the hill, down into Brigel's corner. Dirk again clinging onto this, hanging it all the way around the outside. Alex Lofer wanting to hang it around the outside of No Name Corner. He's already made contact once. This time runs out of road, dipping a wheel into the gravel. Owen is the red carpet rolled out for the championship leader, finding the smallest of gaps down the inside of Pool, and Alex Lofer's found himself losing 3 places.
Unbelievable! Alex Lofer just caught again, just as the Oscar was earlier, in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Owen, brilliant opportunistic driving, as we've come to expect from him. He moves up into 4th position on the road. This battling, though, still giving Ryder every chance. The rain doesn't seem to be getting much heavier. The gap is still 13 seconds. And you'd have to say, unless these tyres completely run out of grip, maybe that's a sign with the DRS at last being disabled. The conditions gradually worsening. Are they worsening quick enough, though? That gap is holding very nicely. early for the Red Bull driver, who navigates Lassor still at the head of the race emphatically, as up in front, Alex Lofer tries to strike back against Owen, and they're going to run side by side. The two race winners of the season dueling it towards Lassor. Owen locks the rear, get it stopped and turned in, and holds on in front of the Red Bull driver. It's amazing to see these guys go at it, but how detrimental is it to their own chances in this race? Tony Roche still running comfortably at the front of the train, but I tell you what though, Tom, he's not catching Riedel quickly enough. He needs the conditions to get worse.
Taking 6/10 of a second through La Source, but with this straight, down the Kemmel straight, they're not going to gain too much time back. Alex Lofer just jinking over to the middle of the circuit, thinking that he could send it up the inside of Owen, who, well, they've been knocking 10 bells out of each other for the previous 30 seconds or so, and all over the place is the Alpine desperately trying to cling on to fourth position. They've taken a further second out of Riedel. This is not over, everybody. That time is going to start coming down very, very quickly indeed. And the key thing, as you pointed out, the DRS being disabled, that is the absolute certainty that the intermediates are the tyres you want to be on. And now the time coming down very quickly. It's nearly under 10 seconds. I think Riedel, the rain has just come a couple laps too early for him.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's just when the grip goes, it goes so quick, and you're seeing him now hemorrhaging that time. The track conditions have worsened substantially on this lap, and well, I said it was not coming down fast enough, but ultimately once you hit that cliff, it goes, and it goes quick, and the gap has been halved on this lap. Tony Roche is closing up to him. Riedel, well, it was a bold call from the Super Swede, and he's given us some great, fantastic entertainment, but I think he may have to concede on this strategy. He goes straight on into the bus stop. He can't even bring it back if he wanted to pit. The grip has just dissipated, and yeah, the gap is being hammered down by Tony Roche. Now he's gained 10 full seconds on this lap, and Riedel, well, it's been an incredible charge at the front of this race, but ultimately those slicks have started to betray him.
Sayonara, Tony Roche is going to say as he powers past the Red Bull in not too long into the future. Owen is still now very close to the back of Dirk. The battle for second continues to rage on, considering the Ferrari has a corner-cutting penalty looming over his head as well. Through Eau Rouge and Radion we go. Tony Roche continues to steal chunks of time out of Riedel's lead. It's now less than a second. No DRS, of course, but by the time we get to the Les Combes chicane, this should be very easy work. Enzo Sabaton's out retiring in the pits, though, and not close enough to make a move down into turn number 7. And look at this, Riedel, you've got to feel for him, absolutely no grip at all, and flying past goes Tony Roche, drifting through Rivage, but Tony Roche slightly wide. He's been caught short by that, and Dirk launches it round the outside. He's going to try and rocket past the slightly compromised RB car. He's got the grip on the karting line, becomes the inside for No Name corner. This is going to throw a spanner in the works for the driver that's got a penalty, and through goes the Ferrari. Owen started down the order. Can he make it back-to-back wins? Tony Roche still wants to cling on to this around the outside of Pouon, but it's not quite there for the man that has just lost a second in overtaking a car that's 12 seconds a lap slower.
I cannot believe that. I can have no explanation for why Tony Roche lost so much momentum there. He seemed to get the move done on the entrance to Malmedy, but he had no speed on the exit. Dirk takes full advantage, and Tony Roche, well, he doesn't have to worry about Dirk because of the penalty, but it has put him into the clutches of the chasing pack. Owen smells an opportunity for a second consecutive race when Tony Roche is still swarming all over the back of Dirk. He can try and get that buffer to the car as he goes boldly round the outside. Just about hangs on to the... That's going to give him the inside leg. Heading in towards the bus stop. Can he judge the braking point to perfection? He runs just a little bit deep, but he gets it done. Dirk is forced out of lane. Owen trying desperately to follow through. Look at Alex. Alex storming into the bus. 2 places in 1. Astonishing stuff. Tony Roche's trying to back off. Heading into the entry of Lassor. Alex gets up and alongside. He didn't want to give them the slipstream, it seemed. Tony Roche was so early in the brakes. He's still trying to give away the to Alex Lofer, who goes into the bottom of our road. They're locked together through the 2 corners. Dirk gets a second time penalty. Owen is charged. E4 trying to get back. Tony Roche gets his nose back in front. Owen charging around here, trying to snatch away the race lead. Goes around here, Sina Tony. Right to the edge of the track. The Alpine is through. Astonishing stuff. Oh.
You can't do that. You cannot do that. Owen from absolutely nowhere. And it's going to be back-to-back wins. Although don't back the horse quite as early as we'll say, because there's still half a lap to go. And as the conditions continue to deteriorate, do not discount Tony Roche and do not discount Alex Lofer, who for one brief moment thought that he was getting the win that he felt was rightfully his, thrown back into his court, but in the end he drops back down into third position. Dirk tumbling down to fifth, plus 6 seconds worth of penalties. He's going to get thrown out of the points paying positions. Owens got just over a sector to go as he negotiates the Fania chicane for the final time. Half a second the gap over Tony Roche, half a second the gap to Alex Lofer behind. He's slightly wide, but look at that. Tony Roche for the second week running is drifting in his attempts to try and catch up to the race leader, and for the second week running he might have second place stolen from him in the final couple of corners. Owen is powering away. He's got little to think about now. It's Alex Lofer who's trying to find any which way to get past the RB into the bus stop chicane. Is he close enough to dart it up the inside? He's going to try and lob it around the outside. There's not the space, but for the second week running it's a spa showing, a masterclass showing. Owen pulls it out of the hat. Here's the winner in Belgium. It's Tony Roche from Alex Lofer. Marius Formula in fourth. Dirk is going to tumble to some tune outside of the top 10. Well. Not good news for him at all. Marius Formula in fourth ahead of Azam. The two Papaya McLarens who got the strategy wrong. Owen, for the first time this season, fails to finish on the podium. Lawrence and then Armate, who got the strategy completely wrong, pitted way too early as ninth. And Yasir Saki rounding out our provisional point scorers. Let's just make that one clear, because there is quite a lot for the stewards to try and digest post Grand Prix. But it is Owen who somehow pulled the rabbit out of the hat when he needed to. He was out of contention so many times throughout this race, and in the end pulled through 4 wide into the Lèche-Combe chicane on the final lap. He came up trumps and he picks up his second win of the season.
And breathe. Wow, what a finale to this Belgian Grand Prix. First the heartbreak of Riederdal, and then Tony Roche just, I have to say, mismanaging that final lap, but you have to say what a move from Owen. He takes yet another race win and substantiates that championship lead from Tony Roche on the road. Alex Lofer takes third place from Marius Formula, Azem Volakongen, Oscar Lawrence, Matteo and Yasir Saki round at the top 10, then Dirk Finlay, Riederdal, Lafite, Nico Sauce, Zinedine Hajjaj, Enzo Sabaton, Zach Steyler, Hazara, Francesco Lago. That is the order of the day. Owen, 2 wins in 3, and well, as a contrast to the race at Jeddah, which he controlled from the front and merely just held off the intentions of Tony Roche, this one, from 9th on the grid, feels almost like a miracle in comparison, and all you can say is, what a drive.
What a drive indeed, and it really makes the championship very interesting, doesn't it? Because he's going to have quite the sizable advantage, considering Owen was the only driver to finish on the podium in both of the first 2 races, and he was down in position number 9, so think of the advantage that he is going to have. Hats off Tony Roche, hats off Alex Lofer. They gave us quite the battle come the end of the race, but they couldn't quite get it over the line. And Tony Roche was counting his lucky stars that for the second week running, he didn't find himself losing second place on the last lap of the Grand Prix.
Yeah, and you could see it. I think if it continued much further, that would have been the case, because yeah, you could see just there was no ease in his driving. It's hard to really describe, but yeah, it just fell apart on the final lap. Alex Lofer was all over him. Of course, Alex Lofer will be ruining his own missed opportunities in that Belgian Grand Prix. It looked like for the longest time like it was going to be one of those two coming away with the race victory today, but in the end they were both denied. Just so many factors that went into that end result. An incredible finale to the race. Again, the rain throwing in a massive curveball, the different strategies, and just a breathless fight to the line. PSF1 does not disappoint.
Doesn't, and we didn't even know the rain was going to be coming. We didn't get a weather forecast update, and then we got to lap 12, came up towards the Fania chicane, and we saw the streaks on the halo, and that threw so many cats into the tree that was infested with pigeons. I feel for Riederdal as well, who tried his best to stick it out all the way to the end of the Grand Prix on what was, as it turned out, the wrong tyre strategy. He was a couple of laps short of making it work, and well, throwing egg on the faces of all of the other drivers that went for the intermediates and went for the intermediates way too early. Armateo did 10 laps on his set of intermediate tyres. Realistically, he needed to cut that short by half of it and pit with 5 laps to go to get those tyres on. But how does it set up the rest of the season? Does Owen go into this knowing that he's picked up a win on what was effectively a bad day? We do need to preface it, as Gio has done as well. Penalties will most certainly be applied to a couple of drivers. We didn't quite see who was the cleanest and who wasn't, but it was very, very exciting at the end with the stewards. And I think a lot of drivers involved will have something to say.
Yeah, and well, we had a remarkably quiet stewards room after the race in Jeddah. That I do think that will contrast what we will see coming up very, very soon in that stewards room. So we'll keep an eye on that all throughout the evening, and yeah, wait for those reports which will fill you in on next time out, of course. But yeah, just back on Owen. I haven't calculated exactly what his championship lead is going to be, but it is going to be very much noticeable as he went into this round at 10 points already clear of Alex Lofer, just 3 in front of Oscar, but Oscar, of course, not picking up quite as many points. So he is going to substantially extend that lead in the standings. And well, for a driver who finished, I think it was 18th in the standings last season, only his second season in PSF1, rising to the top. And I guess it does show, Tom, how much this game can really rejig that pecking order. A driver who showed flashes of talent, but astonishingly climbs right up to the front, and well, 3 podiums in 3 races, 2 wins from that. All of a sudden looks like a dominant force in the top tier of racing on PlayStation.
100%. And that's what you see when the margins are so fine, when you transfer from one game to another, and the physics are just slightly different. If you can find, 300ths of a second, that's going to pick you up 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9 places in a qualifying session and just help you along in the race as well. 3 down. We've had 3 very exciting Grand Prix. If you weren't here at the start of the stream, let's just have a quick look at the calendar. We are not here in 7 days' time. It is a break week, and then we will reconvene in 2 weeks' time for Imola, then Silverstone, Hungary and Bahrain. Second and final break week before 5 races to finish us off: Texas, Japan, Vegas, Brazil and Mexico. And just to round us off, Dan, been lovely having you alongside me, of course. For the rest of the season, when people want to check you out after we finish our comm sessions, where can they find you on the old socials?
Yeah, so the only social I'm actually on at the moment is Twitter, or X. I'm not sure what we're addressing that as these days, but handle is Daka23 or DAKEH23. So if you were to drop on by, drop a follow, that would be much appreciated.
Make sure you do. If you're interested in what I am doing, at TW6 on Twitter or on TikTok and Instagram, wilco.coms or wilco.dart. But that has been an incredibly enthralling Belgian Grand Prix. We get some respite for 14 days rather than 7. We will be back in action for Imola, another legendary circuit. Hopefully we see some more legendary racing. And also in 2 weeks' time, we'll update you on what the stewards find, because I think they're going to be very busy, probably taking up all 14 days. But thank you everybody for watching. It is a pleasure as always. We will see you for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Until then, it is goodbye.